"Sir, I see her husband every day, and he's right there." The guard's voice didn't even carry malice, just amusement. Casual, like he was pointing out the weather. I turned. There she was. Dana, my wife. Executive Vice President of Global Strategy, or whatever fancy title they handed her last quarter. Wearing that tight charcoal blazer I helped pick out last Christmas. The one she said made her feel like she ran the room. Her left hand dangled a designer tote. Her right was being guided gently by a man with slicked back hair and the kind of tailored suit you don't buy off the rack. He had one hand on her lower back. They were laughing. Laughing. I stood there, holding a paper-wrapped bouquet of flowers from the same shop she used to love back when we still had weekends. Yellow lilies, her favorite. I must have looked like an idiot. A retired systems analyst in an old golf pullover and jeans, holding flowers like a damn sitcom extra. I didn't speak. Not to the guard. Not to her. Not to the man walking out with my wife. I didn't throw the bouquet, or make a scene, or yell across the lobby like some jilted teenager. I just nodded, said thanks, and walked out like I had been running an errand, not trying to surprise my wife of 28 years. Back in the car, the flowers sat on the passenger seat, wilting against the heat-glazed window. I didn't drive home right away, just sat. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, cold. My jaw locked so tight I thought a molar might crack. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even angry yet. I was just still. That kind of still where your brain goes sideways and starts pulling old receipts out of forgotten drawers. Travel dates that didn't match hotel check-ins. Meetings that got rescheduled at the last minute. Late-night Zoom calls with hair and makeup too perfect for client strategy. People listen to these stories every day and never hit subscribe. If this one hits you somewhere real, that little button helps us keep telling them. We read every name. Anyway, I drove home without music. No radio, no GPS, no noise. Just the sound of my blinker and that flower wrapping crinkling every time I turned a corner. Once inside, I didn't go to our bedroom. Didn't even take off my shoes. I walked straight into the office I hadn't used in months, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. It was labeled in her handwriting, back when she used to help me keep receipts for tax season. Dana, inconsistencies. I'd started it as a joke, back when she forgot to log a spa weekend she claimed was a team retreat. But over time, I just kept dropping things in. Nothing explosive, just strange overlaps. Duplicate flights. Conference locations that changed last minute, but not on social media. A hotel key card she forgot in her coat pocket once. Wrong city, wrong date. She'd laughed it off. You're just paranoid. It's all your work. You never know how to shut off. I hadn't opened that folder in over 4 years. But I never threw it out either. And now, sitting there in the quiet hum of the office lights, I took out a pen and started updating it. There was something deeply disturbing about how calmly it came back to me. I cross-referenced the date on her most recent Asia Strategy Summit with the emails she forwarded me. Then I opened my laptop, logged into the back end of a system I technically no longer had access to. Technically, because what Dana had never fully understood, what no one at her company did, not really, was that when I left, I didn't walk away. I retired, yes, but a little shell firm kept my name on a compliance consulting contract. Just a line item, a few thousand a month. In exchange, I maintained the old digital infrastructure I helped design back when they merged with a Singapore partner. That infrastructure? It still pinged me anytime someone logged unusual travel patterns into their executive expense system. And lately, it had been pinging a lot. I sat back in my chair, hands steepled. A man was walking my wife out of her building. The building I helped design firewalls for. The company I'd quietly watched grow for a decade. The files in front of me weren't just emotional breadcrumbs. They were the beginning of a trail. And the thing about me? I don't follow trails. I build them. The folder was exactly where I'd left it, bottom drawer, under a stack of old system design blueprints no one had asked for in a decade. Funny. At the time, Dana had said, "Why are you keeping that crap? We're past that. Let it go." But I didn't. I never threw it out. Never deleted the cloud backup either. Never fully convinced myself I wouldn't need it again. There was a reason I hadn't labeled it tax receipts or family vacation like everything else. I'd written it with a Sharpie in all caps. Dana, inconsistencies. She laughed when she saw it once. Jesus, Jack, could you be more dramatic? I smiled back, just keeping track of my investments. Inside, receipts from hotel chains she claimed she never stayed at. Duplicate Uber trips in cities where she was supposedly attending conferences alone. A printed screenshot from a friend's Facebook post, showing Dana laughing in a cocktail bar when she told me she was stuck in a red-eye layover. Nothing that screamed affair, not then. Just off. The kind of off you learn to ignore, slowly. Especially when you're the one making excuses for her. She's stressed. She's building her career. Don't be the insecure husband. I told myself that so many times I could have embroidered it on a pillow. But on that night, after the flowers, after the guard's casual chuckle, after watching some slicked-up executive touch her like they shared a mortgage, I didn't have to lie to myself anymore. I opened the folder and began updating. First, I printed out the time-stamped security footage screen cap I had quietly emailed to myself from a discreet camera near the lobby desk. A snapshot, 5:36 p.m. Dana, her hand on the man's forearm, both smiling. Then I pulled out her calendar entry for that same date. Client dinner, China Telecom Group. Location, private dining room, 16th floor. The man in the photo? White, mid-40s, 6 foot something, not remotely Chinese, and definitely not telecom. Next, I checked the card she'd left on the kitchen island that morning. Dana liked handwritten notes when she was faking intimacy. Wish me luck with the Asian delegation tonight. Don't wait up, yellow heart. I clipped it to the photo. Paper trail, emotional trail, lies wrapped in calligraphy. I poured more coffee and did something I hadn't done in a while. I opened my old scripts. The ones I used to run data integrity checks across multiple server endpoints. There were still fragments of those servers embedded in their expense management system. Dana's firm had never fully rebuilt after I left. Too expensive, too complicated. The code still recognized my credentials because no one ever really deleted me from the architecture. And when I searched her employee ID across the vendor reimbursement logs, something clicked. Not rage. Not pain. Something cleaner. A pulse. She'd never removed my name. Back in the day, Dana used to put me down as a contact for systems security compliance whenever she submitted international expense justifications. She'd laugh about it. You're my built-in excuse. If something doesn't match, I just blame the audit guy. The name was still there, buried in the metadata. Jack C. as secondary verifier. Not even redacted when she and her shiny CFO toyboy booked themselves into adjoining rooms at a luxury business retreat in Barcelona 3 months ago. I cross-referenced the expense report with internal approval logs. Boom. A time gap. 2 separate entries for the same room, filed from the same IP within a 2-minute window. One under her name, one under his. Different cards. Same justification note. Global operations planning. I didn't flinch. Because you know what's better than catching someone in a lie? Catching them using your name to cover it. There's something wildly poetic about being erased emotionally while still being embedded in their infrastructure like a ghost script. Dana moved on, built a new version of herself, rebranded, refitted, promoted. But she never cleaned the root system, never dug deep enough to erase me properly. It wasn't just a name. It was a lever, a silent little fingerprint sitting inside every shady transaction she thought no one would ever trace. I sipped my coffee and leaned back. This wasn't about heartbreak. This wasn't about forgiveness or closure or whatever cheap slogans fill therapy office walls. This was about data. And data always has a pattern. She had no idea what she'd left behind. But I did. The funny thing about digital systems is that most people think they're linear. Log in, log out. Push a button, get a result. But under the hood, it's a graveyard of footprints. A living autopsy of everything a person does when they think no one's watching. Dana used to tease me for being obsessed with metadata. You'd rather flirt with a spreadsheet than look at me, she once joked. I laughed. But she wasn't wrong. I trusted data, not people. Her company had been my last big contract before retirement. After they absorbed a European telecom firm and their IT systems started crashing under the weight of 2 mismatched infrastructures, I was brought in as an external architect. Discreet, silent, efficient. I spent 2 years rebuilding their compliance backbone. Everything from audit trails to user credential routing to internal risk flags. And then, just before I stepped back, I built something small. Harmless looking. It wasn't a trap. Not then. Just a system heartbeat. A passive monitor that logged executive-level user IDs and mapped their travel filings to real-time pings from the firm's endpoint check-ins. Think of it as an immune system. It didn't stop anything. It just quietly noticed when something was wrong. I never told Dana. She thought I'd moved on to golf and arthritis supplements. She thought my mornings were spent wandering garden centers while she scaled her ivory tower. But every quarter, a shell company I'd incorporated in my brother's name sent out a tiny invoice. For digits. Infrastructure integrity monitoring. Paid like clockwork. And tonight, I opened that backend for the first time in nearly a year. Her ID came up instantly. D. Waldron, Executive Access Tier 3. I ran a query. Login times. Device fingerprints. IP geolocation. VPN routing. The kind of things most execs don't even know are tracked unless they've read their own compliance documentation, which none of them do. 2 login entries jumped out. Same day as her supposed Asia conference. One from her usual tablet, geotagged in downtown Seattle, not Taipei. The second, 22 minutes later, came from a secure workstation tied to her vendor liaison, aka the tall glass of arrogance I saw walking her out of the building. That terminal had only one open session, a booking portal for corporate flights. Destination? Cabo. Not Taipei. Not even the same hemisphere. I opened her travel authorization request for that trip. The memo was a classic Dana special, half real, half polished lie. Client relations dinner with emerging tech partner, layered with buzzwords like synergy and cross-border visibility. But the hotel they build? I recognized the chain. My old system pinged a flag instantly. It was one of the sensitive vendors, places frequently misused by employees claiming travel reimbursements for personal vacations. Back when I designed the system, I'd created a list of them, hidden, just for me. They'd never removed it. I clicked View Exceptions. 6 trips in the last 8 months. All tied to her ID. All pinged with the same vendor override flag. None investigated. Not once. I leaned back in my chair, watching the list populate. Each entry a little breadcrumb. A pattern emerging like mold under a rug. And this is where it got fun. The final entry, last month, had a note attached. Not written by Dana, but by the firm's CFO. Approved under dual client hospitality. Internal justification on file. CFO. Mr. Suit. The same man who touched her back like he had equity in it. I cross-checked that approval ID with Dana's login logs. She'd signed off on it, twice. Her name appeared both as the executive requesting the travel and the secondary verifier. That was a violation. Not just corporate policy. SEC-level violation. Dual approval on a non-disclosed vendor reimbursement where the verifier had a direct romantic link to the requester? That's not messy. That's nuclear. I didn't print it. Not yet. I saved it to a drive I hadn't touched in years. Encrypted. Tagged it under the alias I used when I submitted internal audit reports during mergers. Then I checked the backend logs one more time. My script had picked up something else. A pattern of late-night logins from Dana's home IP, but from a second device. Not hers. Not her work laptop. Something else. A fingerprint I didn't recognize. I narrowed the field. It belonged to him. The CFO. He'd logged in remotely using her Wi-Fi 6 times in the past 2 months. Each time just after 11 p.m. Each time accessing the internal disbursement portal. I didn't need to see the footage. The logs told the story better than any photo ever could. I sat there for a long time, sipping cold coffee. There was no panic. No fury. Just confirmation. The kind of deep, satisfying certainty that systems guys like me live for. People lie. Patterns don't. She thought she had outgrown me. Thought I was just the guy who used to fix printers and talk about database encryption like it was art. But she was still living inside my system. And the file they never knew I kept? It just started writing itself. I looked him up. Not out of jealousy. Out of curiosity. You see a man guiding your wife out of a building like he owns both her and the exit. Your instinct isn't rage. Not when you've spent 30 years documenting truth for a living. No, your instinct is cataloging. You collect, sort, tag. It's like watching a new species crawl out from under a log. You don't scream. You study. His name was Bryce Halter. Chief Financial Officer. Mid-40s. MBA from Stanford. Divorced twice. A few mild scandals buried in corporate news clippings. Unsubstantiated allegations of expense misreporting. Inconclusive HR review. That kind of sanitized language only money can buy. He had a reputation for mentoring ambitious executives. His mentorship, apparently, included long weekends in Mexico, client dinners in Dubai, and private billing codes that no one inside the firm ever dared question. Because Bryce wasn't just any suit. He was the one who knew where the real money moved. I ran both their names through the backend audit log I still had access to. 2 overseas trips pinged immediately. Different bookings, yes. Different departments, different expense justifications. But the same hotel, same nights. Identical check-in timestamps, 15 minutes apart. And the access log showed them both entering the building the night they returned, separately, but within seconds of each other. I checked again. The elevator camera. Dana used her keycard to unlock the executive floor. 5 seconds later, Bryce's keycard pinged the same door. You'd think they'd at least stagger their returns. Use some plausible deniability. But no, these two had grown comfortable. Sloppy. I didn't call Dana. Didn't demand explanations. What was she going to say? It's not what it looks like. No, I called someone else. Mark Landis, former colleague, now partner at a private equity firm with a controlling stake in Dana's company. The type of guy who once told me, "We don't care about love triangles. We care about liability." I didn't say hello when he answered. "Mark, you might want to take a peek at your CFO's expense filings," I said. "Cross-reference them with HR-flagged travel justifications. Pay special attention to anything that mentions strategic alignment or dual representation." There was a pause. A chair creaked. Then, "You calling me from a burner?" "Nope. What am I looking for?" "You'll know it when you see it." Click. I didn't know Mark more than that. He was smart, paranoid, and he hated Bryce from the first day they met. I just gave him an excuse. A surgical blade. From that point on, I shifted targets. Not Dana. Not her calendar. Not the dumb monogrammed hotel robes she probably wore while texting me, "Long day. Talk later, 2 hearts." I was done with the romance angle. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about systemic exposure. Bryce hadn't just seduced my wife. He'd used her. Maybe willingly, maybe not. But the man was laundering something through her executive approval channel. The receipts didn't make sense. One reimbursement request for onboarding consultants at a hotel known for luxury spa retreats. Another for off-site advisory meals at a 3-Michelin-star restaurant in Lisbon, filed under Dana's cost center. He was ghostwriting his grift through her name. And she was either too stupid or too infatuated to notice. Or maybe she noticed just fine. Didn't matter. I wasn't building a case for a marriage counselor. I was building a case for shareholder fury. So I pulled another thread. The firm's quarterly reports listed vendor payments by tier. Most were normal: cloud services, legal fees, IT licenses. But there was a line item marked Heron Advisory. I remembered the name. They used to be a boutique finance firm I consulted for years ago. Except they went under 5 years back. Yet here they were, still billing Dana's department. Dead firm. Live payments. I ran the payment trail. It bounced through 3 holding companies, 2 of which shared Bryce's old addresses as registered office spaces. Shells. Stacked like Russian dolls. I knew this pattern. This wasn't romantic recklessness. This was embezzlement. At scale. And Dana? Dana was either the fall girl or the co-pilot. So I crafted a little package. Not flashy. Just an anonymous dossier uploaded to a cloud folder I knew Mark's analysts scraped every morning. Tagged it with internal codes. Timestamped approvals. Vendor names. Internal routing logic. 1 red flag is a coincidence. 10 is a pattern. 47? That's an indictment waiting for the right hands. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was a purge. And the man walking her out of that lobby with his hand on her back? He thought he'd won. Thought the husband was just another retirement casualty with too much free time and a receding hairline. But Bryce didn't realize something crucial. The system he used to hide inside? I built it. And I never left. The boardroom at Lucent Core always smelled like old money and forced optimism. Reclaimed wood table, floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view no one ever actually looked at, and a soundproof hush that made every whisper feel like it could trigger a merger. On Thursday afternoon, at precisely 4:43 p.m., the board secretary returned from a late lunch to find a slim manila folder placed dead center on her desk. No name, no sender, just a black label across the front in block print. Inconsistencies, Tier 3 review. She opened it. Page 1, a table of contents. Page 2, a visual chart mapping personal travel routes of CFO Bryce Halter and EVP Dana Waldron, overlaid against approved corporate travel paths. Page 3, screenshots of expense filings. Page 4, timestamps from internal access logs. Page 5, the beginning of hell. By page 11, her hands were shaking. The timestamps didn't just show overlapping travel. Those could be explained. The access logs showed joint logins from the same IP addresses within minutes of each other at hotels hundreds of miles from any known client meeting. Booking justifications were vague. Terms like strategic oversight, long-term vision planning, emerging markets offsite. But the actual payment destinations? They weren't in any emerging market. They were in beach resorts, 5-star properties, and in one case, a luxury cruise line flagged for high-end corporate fraud in 3 countries. There was a section titled Duplicated Authorizations. It showed Dana approving multiple disbursements that were, on paper, requested by subordinates who had either left the company months ago or were on maternity leave at the time. Then came the audit trail showing that Bryce had backdated 3 compliance memos. One of them was digitally signed using a machine ID that, thanks to Jack's script, still fingerprinted as Exec Legacy Arch, JC Admin. That was me. The internal fingerprint was still tagged to my alias, which they never scrubbed when they changed systems. It didn't grant access. It just flagged anyone dumb enough to reroute financial data through a legacy path I designed, which Bryce had done multiple times. Then came the killer section, cross-referenced HR travel claims with third-party geolocation data from mobile logins. Dana's phone had pinged towers in Florence during a New York summit. The tower ID and ping time matched a local hotel's Wi-Fi log, where Bryce's account also accessed the firm's secure portal. There was no way around it. The two had been sharing access, covering for each other, forging second-level approvals, and laundering money through shell vendors buried in legacy code. The file ended with a note. Not handwritten, not signed, just printed in the same block font as the front label. This system has been compromised from within. Compliance is a mirror, not a blind spot. Clean it, or be seen ignoring it. The board secretary stood up so fast her chair toppled. She didn't even notice. She just walked, calm, robotic, straight to the CEO's office and handed him the file. Didn't say a word. Just waited as he read page after page, his jaw tightening with each flipped sheet. When he hit page 26, he reached for his landline. Cancel the Friday agenda, he said. Schedule a closed session audit meeting with the internal committee. And tell security I want a silent lockout on Halter's system credentials immediately. And Ms. Waldron? The secretary asked. He didn't look up. Not yet. Then he leaned back, closed the folder, and whispered to himself. Who the hell did this? It was the first of many whispers that would swirl through that building over the next 24 hours. Whispers in elevators, in bathrooms, between analysts who had no idea what they were even scared of yet. Because the file didn't come with a source. No IP trail. No timestamped sender. It had appeared like a ghost. The kind of ghost that doesn't knock. The kind that's already inside the walls. And as the file made its way, copy by copy, into the hands of each board member that evening, each one reading it in silence, watching their company's pristine image crack, they all felt the same thing crawl up their spines. Not just panic, but the awareness that someone had been watching. Not for weeks, not for months, years. And they had just gotten tired of waiting. It was close to midnight when my phone lit up. I was at my desk, still running timestamp cross-checks like a man disassembling a bomb. You don't rush when you're cutting wires, especially when the wires are embedded in your wife's career and the man she'd chosen to gamble it with. The name on the screen surprised me. Allie. Dana's daughter from her first marriage. 24 now. Grad school in Vermont. Quiet. Observant. Too sharp for her own comfort. She and I were never close in that forced step-parent way, but we understood each other in a kind of quiet, unspoken rhythm. I taught her to drive, helped with FAFSA forms, tucked cash into her glove box before her first road trip without saying a word. Her message was short. Mom said you were traveling. She looked weird. That was it. No emojis. No small talk. Just a crack in the perfect shell Dana tried to project. I sat back and stared at the text. Allie had always been good at reading tone. She was the kind of kid who noticed when two people stopped laughing in the middle of dinner conversations, who heard the silence between words more than the words themselves. I thought for a moment, then typed. She's not wrong. I've been revisiting some old footage. And I meant that quite literally. Earlier that week, while pulling access logs, I'd stumbled across archived security footage from a strategy retreat Dana had billed to the company 2 years ago. The trip was supposedly canceled due to COVID restrictions. Her official email to me said, "Babe, whole thing got scrapped. Guess I'm stuck home with you after all, faced with tears of joy." But the footage I found told a different story. Dana in a silk blouse, stepping into the rooftop lounge of a resort in Napa. Bryce not far behind, checking his watch while a server handed them 2 flutes of champagne. Timestamp. Same day she had posted a photo of our backyard with the caption, "Quarantine cooking vibes, a shallow pan of food, yellow heart." I hadn't known what to do with the video at first. It felt too cold, too surgical, like dissecting a memory. But now, with Allie's message sitting in front of me like a hand outstretched in the dark, I knew exactly what to do. I uploaded the clip to a private folder, one I'd used years ago to share her graduation montage. I added 3 screenshots. Dana in a luxury suite in Madrid. Dana filing a fake client meeting while checking into a couples-only resort in Santorini. Dana approving a reimbursement labeled International Vendor Strategy while getting a facial at a spa where I had once taken her for our anniversary. I didn't write anything emotional. No monologue. No bitterness. Just the link. 10 minutes passed. The typing indicator blinked on, then disappeared, then reappeared. Then finally, a single word came through. Oh, that was it. But it landed like a stone dropped into glass. Because when Allie says, oh, it doesn't mean she's surprised. It means she just rearranged everything she thought she knew, and none of it fits anymore. I leaned forward and typed, I'm not asking you to pick sides. I just want you to have the truth before someone sells you the edited version. She didn't reply. Not that night. But 15 minutes later, the server pinged me with a second access notification. Allie had rewatched the video twice. She'd downloaded the screenshots. She'd saved the folder. And whether Dana knew it yet or not, the story she would try to tell later, the half-truths, the corporate spin, that your stepdad overreacted, none of it would land. Because the one person who had no stake in the power games, no financial exposure, no loyalty to the office or the boardroom or the narrative Dana built like a fortress, was already quietly walking away from her. And not because I asked her to, but because Dana looked her in the eye and lied. And I didn't have to say a single word. The data did all the talking. Friday, 10:02 a.m. Dana was poised. She wore the navy blazer she once told me was her power armor, tailored sharp at the shoulders, with a silk cuff that peaked just enough to hint at elegance beneath authority. Her lipstick was precise. Phone off. Tablet charged. A neat stack of pre-printed binders at each board member's seat, labeled Q4 Expansion Strategy, prepared by EVP Waldron. She looked like a woman who belonged at the top of the skyscraper. Until the head of investor relations leaned forward, casually, as if asking about the weather. Before we start, quick clarification, he said, tapping one of the binders. Why were you listed as the approving officer on 2 non-compliant disbursements last quarter, both tied to your department's vendor liaison? The room didn't go silent. It just held its breath. Dana blinked. 1, 2, 3 times. Her hands didn't move. I don't know what that is, she replied. Not defensive, not shocked, just stalled, like a system hit with an unknown command. The CEO looked down, flipped the page, looked back up. That liaison, he said slowly, is our CFO, Bryce. The name wasn't spoken. It didn't have to be. The entire room knew. And right on cue, like a curse spoken aloud, the phone started buzzing. One at the far end of the table, then 2 more. A chime from a smartwatch, a vibration from a purse. The chairman of the board glanced down at his screen, froze, then angled the display away, as if embarrassed by the volume of incoming messages. Dana opened her mouth, maybe to deflect, maybe to explain, but she was 3 seconds too late. The head of compliance walked into the room without knocking. He never showed up at board meetings. Ever. Sorry to interrupt, he said, eyes scanning the table. We need to temporarily suspend digital access credentials for Ms. Waldron. There's an active investigation into several flagged transactions involving internal co-approval violations. The room didn't gasp. This wasn't a soap opera. These were people whose bank accounts pulsed with 7 digits before breakfast. They didn't scream. They observed. Dana's spine stiffened. I'm sorry, flagged by whom? The compliance officer held up a small manila folder, like a man carrying a warrant. Third-party audit reference, backed by metadata from our legacy compliance tool. Also supported by internal cross-referencing from the procurement platform. The approving officer IDs match both yours and Mr. Halter's across 14 entries. 14, she echoed. Her voice cracked for the first time. Minimum, he said. We're still parsing. But the vendor routing and secondary approval pattern triggered an automatic ethics flag. We've frozen the accounts tied to the disbursements until further notice. Dana turned to the CEO. He didn't meet her eyes. Tell me this is a misunderstanding, she whispered. He exhaled. A long, slow breath. Like a man watching a car crash he couldn't stop. I think someone understood the system a lot better than we did, he said. And they've been watching for a long time. She stood suddenly, knocking her water glass. It didn't shatter, just spilled in a slow, spreading arc across the polished wood table, soaking into 3 of the binders. No one reached to help. The head of investor relations spoke again, quiet but direct. Dana, are you formally denying co-authorization on those entries? Yes. I don't remember authorizing those, she said. I mean, I may have signed something, but Bryce handles. Your emails show full submission under your name. The compliance officer interrupted. Dana's breath hitched. My emails? We pulled the backups from the executive server, he said. From the shared access logs. Your user ID, your credentials, your VPN route. But that's not possible, she said. My login shouldn't. Bryce used your Wi-Fi, the compliance officer said. And the timestamps align with remote sessions from your residence. Her voice, barely audible now, cracked a second time. He said it was just temporary. He said I'd never be involved in. You're listed as the secondary verifier. Silence. The head of the board tapped a single finger against the table. I think we're going to need legal in here, he said quietly. Dana sat down again. She didn't pick up the glass. She didn't reach for her tablet. Her hand stayed in her lap, trembling just enough for everyone to pretend not to notice. Across the room, someone's phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another leak. Because this wasn't just about corporate misconduct now. This was about exposure. About the fact that someone, somewhere, had buried a landmine in their foundation, and it was going off in chapters. One disbursement at a time. One signature at a time. One betrayal at a time. Dana had come in expecting applause. Now, she was bleeding credibility on the boardroom floor. And she hadn't even realized yet. This wasn't the end of the pitch. It was the intro. My phone buzzed at 11:38 a.m. Unknown number. No caller ID. The kind of call that would have gone straight to voicemail any other day. Except today wasn't any other day. I picked up. Silence. Then a voice, low and careful. The kind that lives in conference rooms with no windows and long pauses before decisions. Mr. Carson, the man said. Yes. You don't know me. I was told to reach out. Told by who? A contact in internal compliance. They said you were listed in the alert log as a legacy architect. They said you might understand what's happening. I stood from my desk and crossed to the window. My coffee had gone cold, but I sipped it anyway. Outside, a landscaping crew edged the neighbor's lawn. Mundane. Repetitive. Efficient. Who am I speaking to? I asked. A pause. I'm a contractor. I help with digital forensics for events like this. Events. That was generous. He cleared his throat. Can we meet? No. I can come to you. No, you won't. Silence. You already have everything you need, I said. What do you mean? I mean you're digging through logs I built. You're standing inside a system that was never truly yours. It's just leased. You may wear the badge, but the floor plan still has my initials carved into the drywall. I could hear him swallow. I'm just trying to understand how it got this far without detection. That's easy, I said. You weren't looking. Another pause. Okay. Look, sir, off the record. Who else knows? About the connections, the logins, the disbursements, about Bryce, about Waldron. Who else knows? I let the silence stretch. He was nervous. Not scared. Not yet. But he felt the shape of the bomb and was starting to count the wires. Finally, I said, your own system knows. Excuse me. Everything you're seeing? Every ping, every approval ID, every routing discrepancy. It was all there. You built firewalls without pressure sensors. I just turned them on. But the flags, none of them ever hit the escalation threshold. We have safeguards. No, I interrupted. You have filters. And filters can be tuned. Suppressed. Muted. Especially by someone who knows which checkboxes to uncheck. The man exhaled sharply. What are you trying to accomplish? He asked. That's the wrong question. Then what's the right one? I let the words hang for a beat, then delivered them slow. What happens when the people who pretend to monitor integrity realize the architecture was never theirs to begin with? Click. I ended the call. No threats. No confession. No trail. Just a rattle in the walls. I stared out the window as the landscapers packed up and left. Grass clippings floated on the breeze. A child in a bike helmet passed by, laughing into the wind. Peace. Stillness. But inside that building, the one where Dana once rehearsed power stances in the mirror, the walls were shifting. IT was in a frenzy. Legal was clawing through access logs. Executives were whispering in break rooms, wondering if their own fingerprints were on the same ticking device. They couldn't see me, couldn't trace the decisions back to a signature or a badge or a login attempt. But every system I ever built left behind one truth. You can't patch what you don't understand. And they had misunderstood everything. The architecture, the logs, the logic, and worst of all, they misunderstood me. Dana thought I was a ghost, a retired man, her past, but the system knew better. It still remembered the architect. Her phone rang as she stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, still shell-shocked, knuckles white from gripping the edge of the conference table too hard. The binder with her expansion strategy slides was left behind, abandoned and soaked in spilled water and silence. Caller ID, Michael J. The CEO. She hesitated, just for a second, then answered, trying to find her voice before it betrayed the shake in her chest. Michael. The voice on the other end was nothing like the commanding tone she'd come to expect from him. It wasn't clipped. It wasn't businesslike. It was small. Frayed. Dana, he said, slowly, like the name itself hurt to say. What did you do to him? The blood drained from her face. I what? Your husband, he continued, barely above a whisper now. Do you have any idea what you just triggered? She leaned against the wall. Michael, I don't know what you're talking about. No, he snapped, but even the snap was cracked with fear. Listen to me. Do you understand that the architecture of our entire compliance backend is tied to a series of legacy modules he built? Do you understand the flags we're chasing all route through systems he installed? She froze. Jack. Yes, Jack. Your husband. Or whatever he is to you now. His voice cracked again, this time not from anger, but something closer to awe. I thought he was just some outdated tech guy you married before your real career started. He is retired. He's been out for years. No, the CEO said. He was never out. He's embedded deeper than our own IT director. We tried tracing the source of the audit triggers. Dana. Guess what we found? A shell company we've been paying for over a decade. Guess whose name is on the incorporation? Silence. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I asked the compliance team to isolate the pattern of the anomalies. You know what they said? It's like someone was watching the whole time, just waiting for a threshold to cross. Like the system wanted us to trip. Dana gripped the edge of the hallway table, eyes wide, mouth dry. I didn't know, she finally whispered. Michael, I swear to God, I didn't know. That's the part that scares me, he replied. Because you weren't just a bystander. You approved the disbursements. You validated them. You co-signed. And now we have external auditors already requesting access to our filings. No one told me he still had access, she said. He never said anything. You think he'd tell you? Michael's voice dropped lower, like he was talking to a child standing near the edge of a cliff. You think a man who can rig half our architecture to quietly collect proof over years is going to warn you before he lights the match? Michael, please. I can't protect you, he said, and it was no longer a whisper. It was resignation. Your access is revoked pending review. Legal's drawing up formal notice. I suggest you contact a lawyer before the SEC does. Dana's legs gave out just enough to make her stumble. She sat hard on the hallway bench, her phone still pressed to her ear like it might somehow keep the world from collapsing. Michael, she tried again. But he was done, and this time he hung up first. She sat alone, the hum of the overhead lights sounding suddenly like static in her ears. Her hand trembled as she lowered the phone to her lap. Not from shock, but realization. This wasn't some mistake. This wasn't about a fling or a couple of misused expense reports. This was a demolition, one that had started years ago, quiet, unseen, and triggered not by rage, but by design. Jack hadn't reacted when she'd betrayed him. He had prepared, and she had walked directly into it, carrying her lover's signature on every file. Her fingers gripped the phone so tightly it clicked. Everything she had built, every meeting, every promotion, every boardroom power play, was now bleeding through a system she never fully understood. And the man she once called paranoid? He was the architect of the end. He drove past the building just before midnight. Lucent Core's downtown headquarters, a pillar of corporate ambition and polished glass, stood fully lit like a warship burning silently in a harbor. Every window aglow, every floor buzzing, but not with power, with panic. No traffic, no janitors whistling their way through closing shifts. Just parked executive sedans, delivery scooters rerouted for emergency caffeine runs, and the ghost-white reflection of a system in collapse. Jack parked 2 blocks away, tucked into a shadow between a shuttered bakery and a silent law firm that would be very, very busy soon. He didn't need to be closer. He'd been in the building longer than any of them, just not physically. He sipped lukewarm coffee from a travel mug with a cracked lid. The mug read, "World's most average husband." Dana gave it to him on a Father's Day she forgot to show up for. Fitting, in a poetic, small-dollar way. In the corner of his lap, his laptop, word to life. It didn't look like much. Beat-up Lenovo, smudged trackpad, a missing key. But inside was the culmination of a year-long quiet operation, one Jack never planned to activate. Until that day in the lobby. Until the guard smiled, confused, and said, "Sir, I see her husband every day." Click. He opened the drive. A simple interface. 3 buttons. Stall. Verify. Finalize. The first 2 had already been run. Weeks ago. Stall had delayed internal alerts, slowed down any automated risk notices Dana or Bryce might have seen. Verify had pulled every approval, every cross-credential login, every fingerprint Bryce thought he'd buried beneath VPN tunnels and Dana's name. Quietly, elegantly, and now only one button remained. Inside that building, IT was pulling their hair out trying to trace anomalies through systems they never even understood. Legal was choking on metadata. PR was begging for delay memos. Meanwhile, Dana? In her inbox was a single email. From Bryce. The subject line, "It's over." The body, "Everything is falling apart. The board is digging through 3 years of approvals. I think he set us up. Don't reply. Don't call. Get a lawyer. Fast." She hadn't replied. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't breathe. Jack knew that feeling. That kind of stillness when the only thing moving is your understanding of how deeply you've underestimated someone. He hadn't screamed, hadn't thrown things, hadn't posted screenshots or aired grievances on social media. He'd simply watched, waited, and now, the system they both pretended he'd left behind was turning on the very people who thought they could weaponize it. He opened his folder titled Closure. 3 auto-generated reports, each crafted with surgical care. Not exaggerated, not embellished, just clean, precise. With embedded verification logic, AI-flagged anomalies, annotated logs. Recipients. Federal auditors already pinging the firm for quarterly irregularities. The shareholders litigation committee, whose appetite for blood was known and documented. Corporate compliance watchdogs, half of whom Jack had consulted for in the early 2000s. He double-checked the email subjects. Requested audit findings, data integrity violation pathways. The wording was dry, sterile, the kind of thing no executive could ignore, the kind of thing that burns without smoke. He hovered over the final key, paused, not because he doubted it, but because there was a strange quiet now. Not peace, just precision. Everything Dana had built, every polished speech, every 5-year plan, every gala toast, it was all resting on signatures she'd thought were private, on backdoors she never saw, on a marriage she had outgrown, dismissed, and rewritten without consulting the man who still owned the blueprint. Click. Finalize. The screen blinked. Files dispatched. He closed the laptop and leaned back, one hand still on the steering wheel, the other curled around the cracked mug. Inside the building, lights still burned. But Jack didn't need to see what happened next. He already knew. Some storms don't make noise when they land. Some just rewrite everything that stood in their way. Permanently.